An unimaginable injustice unfolds when Evelyn Grace risks everything to unlock the secret of reversing aging, only to find herself trapped outside the flow of real life. Behind it all stands a cold corporate system, refusing responsibility and pushing boundaries for profit, making her struggle even more isolating and unfair. But just when all hope seems lost, the story takes a turn. Evelyn's own awakening changes everything. Listen closely. This is a tale where fate intervenes, the rhythm of life is restored, and justice, at last, has the final word. Evelyn Grace's life was a quiet equation, built from the certainty and repetition of careful routines. Every morning, before sunlight brushed the tops of the eucalyptus trees outside her small San Diego apartment, she orchestrated her own private ceremony. She would wake up in the silent blue hour of pre-dawn, feeling the gentle landscape of tension in her stomach that had never truly abated even in sleep. The world was still gray, liminal, unresolved. Sitting at a small kitchen table, she filled a delicate glass with warm water, sliced a wedge of lemon, and squeezed it until the scent of citrus cut through the numbness in her mind. She would engage in 10 minutes of careful, silent meditation, breathing in time with the slow expansion and retraction of her lungs, willing the rhythm to pull her away from restless anxieties. Sometimes she would find a moment of peace, a single clear note in a symphony of unease. Then she would reach for her notebook, a battered black journal, its pages heavy with looping script and desperate affirmations, and write the same line she had written every day for years. Stay alive, Evie. Evelyn was meticulous, focused, respected by peers for her discipline and insight. In the sterile environment of the lab, she wore her carefully maintained composure as a kind of armor. Her lab coat was never wrinkled, her hair always pinned back. She was the essence of reliability, arriving before anyone else, leaving after the lights had dimmed. Colleagues sometimes speculated about her. She's so together. She must sleep like a rock. She never looks tired. But the truth was more complicated. The mask she wore during the day began to crack the minute she left the humming fluorescence of the lab's corridors. Loneliness was not a stranger, but a silent partner. It clung to the edges of her existence just as surely as the notepad and pen she always carried. The fear that gnawed at her was not the one her peers whispered about. She did not lose sleep dreading wrinkles or thinning hair. What unsettled her was more corrosive. The prospect of running out of time to do something meaningful, to leave some sign she had existed. Each year felt both long and fleeting, each birthday a subtle reminder that life was not a thing you could stockpile. The turning point came, as significant things often do, in the guise of an ordinary morning. Dr. Coleman, her department head, spoke to her with an edge in his voice she had never heard before. Evelyn, come down to Lab 6, immediately. His tone brooked no delay, and as she walked the corridor, she felt the shift in air, the sense that something consequential waited ahead. Lab 6 was unlike the other workspaces. Its cold sterility bordered on hostile. Coleman stood by a heavy steel hatch, fingers flying across a keypad. With a pneumatic sigh, the compartment opened, revealing a tiny vial marked only RE9. Read the data, he instructed, handing her a tablet. The reports were dense but unequivocal. Animal trials showed cell cycling rates reversed, degenerative diseases arrested, even the scarring patterns of advanced age erased in test subjects. The implications were staggering, the kind of prospect that should excite a biochemist to the marrow. Yet even as she scanned the fine print, a strange anxiety built inside her. The administration says no human testing, Coleman said. Ethics board. Corporate isn't interested in anything they can't control. There was something in his gaze, a flicker of frustration, maybe a hint of fear, that lingered after his words faded. That night, Evelyn barely slept. She retraced every line from the report in her mind, trying to discern whether the barrier was truly ethics or simply a reluctance to face the consequences of changing what it means to be human. The idea of controlling time felt both tantalizing and illicit. Lying in bed, she heard the tick of the wall clock and thought how little that sound meant to cells breaking, dividing, repairing themselves. In the following days, Evelyn began to quietly reconstruct the formula from memory, building a microdose protocol with components available for authorized projects. It was a slow process, done entirely after hours, with absolute precision. She double-checked every reagent, every calculation, feeling the pressure of secrecy constricting around her heart. The clock's ordinary noises grew heavier each night. Still, she pressed forward. Finally, the day came when her ritual changed. After meditation, after lemon water, She measured out the prototype, dissolved it into her protein solution, closed her eyes and swallowed. The shift was immediate, but not dramatic. First came a subtle energy, a sensation that her limbs had grown lighter. The stiffness in her joints from years spent standing at lab benches faded. Her vision, always a touch blurry after waking, clarified like a film coming into sharp focus. That day she noticed how easily she could spot microscopic details under the lab scopes. Edges cleaner, contrast stronger. She monitored herself with scientific detachment, keeping logs of everything: reflexes, skin elasticity, resting heart rate. Within a week, she saw the first visible changes. The fine lines at the edges of her eyes vanished. Her skin took on a glow she recognized from photographs of herself 10 years prior. She slept fewer hours but woke feeling refreshed, her thoughts brisk and clear. At first, marvel replaced anxiety. She moved through the world feeling heightened, as if her senses had pulled color and detail from a previously blurred scene. The city's morning air tasted sharper, the sound of birdsong painted through her windows in deep crystal tones. Every detail felt like living poetry, but the sense of miracle didn't last. Within weeks, unease crept in like winter through an open window. Sometimes in the middle of an ordinary task, her vision would fracture. Light seemed to shimmer with unnatural brightness. Objects seemed to vibrate on the edge of her perception. She would walk through busy streets and feel herself slightly out of sync. People's movements felt slow, voices distant and elongated as if played in reverse. Every night she returned to her notebook, her daily affirmation morphing into existential interrogation. How much change is too much? She began to fear not old age but the loss of her own tempo against the world's. She realized she was no longer living within the ordinary cadence of time and human limitation. Her memories of her mother, the one person who had ever made her feel like a child rather than a project, became vivid, flooding her dreams and solitary minutes with a bittersweet ache. Her mother had always told her, "Age is just a form, Evie, a vessel we inhabit. It deserves respect, not contempt." These words, once anodyne, now echoed as warning bells inside her head. The inevitable collision came one Friday evening, months into her private experiment. Dr. Coleman intercepted her in the corridor, expression drawn and hesitant. He didn't raise his voice, didn't scold. Instead, he handed her a folder heavy with printed blood work, scans, and logs. These results, they're not possible for a normal person. Your cell markers, metabolic panels, they don't match known human thresholds. Skin reflectivity, even your eyes. Have you noticed their color shifting? He waited, studying her reaction, a flicker of fear in his own eyes. She tried to maintain her composure, but the tremor in her hands betrayed her. "What do you propose?" she asked, voice barely above a whisper. "Stop," he said simply. "Whatever you're doing, stop it. You're gambling with something we don't fully understand. Biology isn't just chemistry, Evelyn. It has rhythms. Disrupt enough, and He left the threat unfinished, but the warning hung between them, more solid than walls or lab coat fabric. But as she watched him walk away, Evelyn understood what he couldn't say aloud. She had gone too far. Her choices now ran deeper than fear or curiosity. The experiment was no longer a private rebellion. It had remade her, right down to the architecture of who she was. In the days that followed, she found herself torn between wonder and dread, between the promise of youth regained and the threat of existing forever as an outlier. Someone who could not quite belong to the world, nor retreat from what she had become. Despair did not announce itself in Evelyn's life with a sharp break or a cry for help. It crept in slowly, dissolving boundaries she once believed sacred. At first, she told herself the shifts were adaptive. Side effects, perhaps, but all worth it for the greater understanding of time, health, and change. She woke one night and realized she had not slept at all. Her eyes opened since midnight, yet her mind alert, her body rested. Even as days passed, true fatigue never came. She ate less, then barely at all, but her energy remained constant, her heart steady, breath calm. Instead of relief, a new kind of unease took root. It was as if her internal clocks, circadian, hormonal, even the deep ancient rhythms of her cells, had been disconnected from dawn, dusk, hunger, and rest. The gentle pulse that once linked her to the movement of tides and the growth of trees was gone. She existed outside nature's pattern, cut loose from the tether all living things share. Days rolled into one another, sunlit and moonlit hours indistinguishable, and Evelyn found that the world around her had grown both familiar and alien at the same time. Most haunting, however, were the dreams that began to visit her when she did finally slip, briefly, into shallow rest. They were lucid, shining in impossible clarity. In these dreams, she stood in a luminous place that was both her childhood home and the lab, with walls of glass opening onto a sky that pulsed with soft, impossible colors. Across from her stood herself, not as she was now, but as she had been at 20, brimming with curiosity and untouched idealism. This younger Evelyn smiled with the threshold of hope and fearless possibility. "Do you remember," Dream Evelyn would ask, "what it felt like to believe in forever?" There was longing in her eyes and a trace of sorrow. "You wanted to change the world, to outwit time, but is this the world you imagined?" Each night the conversation looped, the older and younger selves circling one another in this otherworldly space. The younger pleaded not for knowledge but for pause, for surrender. Immortality isn't a gift. It's a song that never stops, and so eventually it ceases to be music. It becomes a cage where no day really ends, and no new beginning is meaningful. When Evelyn awoke, a new sensation lingered inside her. It felt not like a heartbeat, but as if her entire body vibrated in time to something larger. A ceaseless rhythm, echoing beyond cells, beyond body. It was not comfort. It was the call of a symphony that would never reach its resolution. Gradually, realization replaced confusion. One morning, as the first light crept over the quiet streets of San Diego, Evelyn moved through her usual ritual, picking up her glass of warm lemon water as sunlight angled between Venetian blinds. She had not thought of days in sequence for weeks, had not felt hunger or weariness. But that morning her hands trembled as she lifted the glass. She noticed a faint return of old stiffness, a hint of coarseness on her skin. The RE9 cycle had run its course. Her body finally began listening again to the rhythms of the natural world. It was not pain that came, it was clarity. In the stillness of the kitchen, with a pool of golden light expanding across the floor, Evelyn understood what she had truly lost. The miraculous reversal of time, the ability to step outside decay, had taken from her the very thing that makes living precious: limits. Without the framework of days and nights, age and change, life's urgency dissolved. There could be no meaningful morning without the shadow of night, no joys of renewal without the letting go of what was past. She sat with the notebook that had traveled through every transformation alongside her. For the first time in months, she changed her morning inscription. It was no longer an appeal to survival or a challenge to mortality, but an acceptance. Don't fight time, dance with it. That day, Evelyn let herself move slowly. She breathed deeply, savoring the emergence of old aches, the fragile pleasure of tiredness. Laughter bubbled up unexpectedly as she realized how little she had cherished these ordinary discomforts, the signatures of belonging to the world. Over the next weeks, Evelyn chose gentle restoration. She abandoned the RE9 microdosing entirely, allowing her biology to find its pace again. With intention, she reinstated her simple morning routine, not for youth or productivity, but for the joy of presence. Breathing, gratitude, stillness, and the imperfect music of her own laughter in an empty kitchen. She took long walks, sometimes allowing herself to feel the sun on her skin until it left faint lines once more. Not a flaw, but a story. At the university, Evelyn gathered a small group of advanced students, biochemistry hopefuls she trusted for their hungry minds and open hearts. She shared her experiences frankly, omitting only the most dangerous protocols, focusing instead on what she had discovered that reached beyond science. "It's not about hacking time or breaking the code of aging," she told them under the dappled shade of jacaranda trees. "The people who truly flourish, the two known for their youth and vibrance, aren't those who chase eternal novelty, but those who begin each day with awareness and intention. Not to fight against the years, but to meet them, to fill every cell, every breath, every memory with the richness of presence." Her message was not a formula, yet it carried its own kind of logic. That the truest reversal of aging is not what happens in labs or with calculated compounds, but within the daily act of living fully aware, gratefully, moment to moment. The records of her research on RE9 Evelyn left in archive storage, her signature appending the documentation. Not for further development, refer to Ethics Review Board before resumption. But beneath this, on the final page, in small and careful letters, she added her own epilogue. "Real youth isn't in your cells, it's in your choice to wake up every day, alive." Each morning after that, Evelyn felt herself returning more and more to the world of boundaries, seasons, and shared experience. Connection seated itself in her life. Laughter with friends, the sweetness of fatigue at night, the richness of simple meals savored in company. She discovered that joy, like youth, is not an achievement, but a habit of attention. To live urgently, gratefully, even as the years pass, and perhaps especially because they do. The miracle was never in cheating time. It was in learning to honor its passing and to measure a day not by lines erased from a face, but by all the moments cherished, the kindness given, the dreams pursued, and the quiet, undramatic miracle of being part of the world's melody once again.